Right, good evening, everybody, and welcome to RPS East Midlands and the third in our winter creative photography series. As we just spoke, the first one was by David, and then Vivica came along and gave a great talk about her journey. And tonight we've got Richard. Richard is quite involved in the RPS East Midlands. He plans it with me, and we've been working together, I think, Richard, for maybe 6 years, 7 years now,
Yeah,
haven't we?
time
Um,
flies.
yeah, which I'm sure will come out in Richard's talk this evening. The meeting is being recorded, and I will send you a link to that. So if you do have to leave early, don't panic, you won't miss anything, or you might just want to watch it again. But what I would do is welcome you all to RPS East Midlands from all over the world tonight, which is fantastic. And at this point, I'll hand over to Richard. And Richard, would you like to take over the meeting?
Yeah, I'll share the screen if
Yep,
that's okay.
fire away. Richard, questions. Sorry, just before we make a start, if anybody's got
Yeah.
any questions, would you like them to save that until the end or just interrupt and ask the question?
No, if you can keep an eye out if people stick their hands up, Stuart, and then I'm happy to take questions as and when.
Yeah, I probably won't be able to see everybody in that case, but if you put it into the chat room, I can pick you up on that quite easily. And then,
Yeah.
yeah, brilliant. Okay, thank you, Richard. Over
Okay,
to
can you
you.
see in the screen?
Yes, we are. East Midlands RPS January 2026.
Perfect. Well, as Stuart says, welcome and thanks for giving up your Sunday afternoon, evening, and for the Americans, probably halfway through the day. Um, just a bit about myself. I was a police officer and retired in 2018. And about 2017, I started to panic and think, what am I going to do with the rest of my life? And I was determined not to go back to work as a civilian because I just thought I've got an opportunity to try something new. I've sort of been interested in photography all my life, but only taking family photos. So in the spring of 2017, I went to the photography show uh, and bought a camera basically. I was thinking about the Canon 5D or the Olympus, made the choice to buy a mirrorless Olympus with no knowledge, no background other than the fact that I quite like the size, but that has really dictated the photography that I've made. Um, so I joined local camera club, having bought a camera. I tend to be an all or nothing person. And then somehow I ended up at the East Midlands RPS talk at Watton and had a rather fateful talk with Stewart in the autumn of 2017. And he'd asked if I'd been to university, and I hadn't ever been to university. And he suggested that I could go. And I can remember going home and telling my wife that I was going to go to university to study photography, and she was absolutely horrified. And I applied straight away, got into the university, but then changed my mind and went to the college. But my wife, 2 days later, also applied for university. She gave up her job as a chiropodist. And me, my son, and my wife all started university together in September 2018. And my plan was to be a landscape photographer. I've no idea why, but when I did retire in May 2018, I went to the Faroe Islands, and the photo that you can see on screen was just a snapshot out of the window, really, but became quite important, this photo, and I'll explain about it later. So, as I say, I went to Lincoln College to do a degree supervised by Hull University, and the college was about 200 metres from Lincoln Cathedral. Um, and I used to wander into the cathedral as a student. I could go in free almost every day to make photos. And it is the most beautiful building. I think they started building it in about 1070. It fell over once because of an earthquake, but it is just a magnificent building. But I was looking for a bit more than just doing the interior of the building all the time, and looked on the website and saw that they were starting a play at the cathedral. Star and Lincoln Theatre Company were starting a play called Oliver. And I contacted the director and said, can I come and make some photos? I'd never been to the theatre before. I think I'd probably been once or twice, but I'd no interest in the theatre. Um, and I went on that first night and I was just hooked. Um, and I was really lucky in that I'd never seen theatre photography. I'd never seen a theatre photographer work. So I didn't understand what I was supposed to do. So I just sort of made it up as I went along. And for Oliver, I attended 28 rehearsals, two tech rehearsals, a dress, and went to 9 shows and made photos at every one of them. And my sort of unique selling point with my photography is that I make the photos and process them and publish them all on the same day. And that's been quite successful for me. Being able to turn the photos round means that people are interested in seeing them. Um, and I've met lots of people and I've formed lots of associations with people and gone on to do personal projects with people. And they're nearly all people that I've met in the theatre. The girl on the right, Katie, she was 14 when I first met her. And I've worked with Katie quite a lot since. And I'll tell you the story later, but basically, Katie's got me something like 40 jobs a year. So the cathedral is a fantastic place to stage a production. Theatre photography is quite a niche thing. It's dark. You've got to be able to use your camera in the dark. You've got to be able to change settings on the fly. You've got to embrace the shadows really and just play with the lights. And this particular production was made in the round. We'd got 650 in the audience. I think we did 12 nights, sold out every night. And the photo that you see on the left is one that I made from Banks's view. I climbed up into the roof of the cathedral to make that shot. But the theatre productions in the cathedral is quite innovative. And for this particular play, we'd got a bar and people at the intermission would go and get a drink, make their way onto the stage during the intermission, and then the play would start while the audience was still on the floor, which caused general panic and gave me a good opportunity to make photos from standing on the tables. I don't know how many photos I published, but something like 3,000 for this particular production. And all my photos are shared on Flickr. As I say, I never understood what I was supposed to do. So I actually make photos during the actual play itself, and I'm sometimes in costume and in makeup, so that I can sort of blend in with the players. Star Linking Theatre Company, big production, 130 in the cast, full orchestra, almost like a West End production, really. And I can remember being asked by the director to do some headshots for the promotion for the show. And he basically wanted half of the face completely in shadow and half in the light, but I had to do them in daytime in a classroom. So I can remember going into college and saying, how on earth do I do this? And then having to do 130 over the next 2 days. But these are the sort of photos that I made for promotion for the show. Everybody had to apply their own makeup or makeup to each other, and they'd all got words on them. As a little aside, just the photo that you see in the centre, I did put that into a camera club competition, and I got 12 out of 20. So I learnt my lesson there. So having done Oliver, we actually started a new play called Shrek, but that was thrown in the bin because of COVID. And by this time, I'd become quite accustomed to photographing lots and lots of people. So when lockdown came,
Richard, can I just interrupt for a moment?
yeah, of course you can.
You mentioned earlier on that you actually got into costumes so you could mix with the actors on the stage.
Yeah,
Are you going onto the stage taking photographs? And if you are, what sort of camera equipment do you use for that and
yeah,
why?
no, I go on stage during dress rehearsals, spend quite a lot of time during dress rehearsals when there's no audience. But But during actual productions, either at the side of the stage or I'm mixing in with the audience. And just because actors, particularly for this production, which was in the round, there's actors all around. I just become one of the people, and I'm not being singled out as being the photographer. Whereas normally a photographer will dress in black and run around like a member of the SAS. I'm a bit more overt. But the photography equipment that I use, I normally shoot three cameras. I used to change lenses a lot. Now I use three cameras. I've got a 24-70 f2.8 on a Leica SL3S, and then I have a equivalent of a 35mm 1.2 on the Olympus, and I'll usually have a 40-150 on the Olympus as well. And I just swap between the three cameras.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you.
During a big production, probably make 2,000 photos during a single night, and then end up with something like 150. So as I say, lockdown came, and I was thinking about something that I might do. And I did see one person was doing lockdown portraits. And on the 2nd of April, about a week into the lockdown, I put a post on the local Facebook group. And I was quite careful on how I worded it, because I thought if somebody says this isn't a good idea, it would have killed it. But I basically said, I'm going to do some lockdown portraits, safe distance, long lens. But if you agree to be photographed, they'll go on Flickr, they'll go on Instagram, and they'll go on Facebook. And on that first day, the next day, I think I made 9 portraits. They weren't particularly set up. I told people that they could present as they wanted. They could dress as they wanted. They could bring things out as they wanted. And I put them on Flickr and on Facebook and on Instagram, as I said. And it started conversations between people in the village. And 10 people, I think 10 people came the next day, and 10 people came the next day, and 10 people came the next day. And over the first lockdown, which I think finished on May the 10th, I made something like 178 portraits, photographed about a third of the village. And as I say, people just presented as they were. After about a week, somebody suggested that I might make a book, and I'd got no experience at that point about making a book. So I actually approached you, Stuart, and asked you to edit the book for me. But I did think after about a week that I might have done something a bit more stylized. But I'm almost pleased I didn't, really, because the whole purpose of the project was to take photos of people from the village. And quite a lot of things have changed since these photos were made. This couple sadly have both died. He'd got dementia at the time, but they've both since passed. And it's become quite important to the village, really. I think I made something like 200 copies of the book. This is another casualty from the lockdown. The lady on the right died during the first lockdown, and that portrait, I understand, is now above their mantelpiece. I tried to capture some of the community. So this is the local shop with paper boys. The shop was really central to the village. Without that at that time, we wouldn't have got any supplies. The only portrait that I requested to do was the vicar, and I contacted the vicar and said, "Can I come and take your portrait?" And there was an ulterior motive for this particular photo, because I was looking for a vantage point to take a photograph of the village for the book cover. And this is the photo that I made. And it was quite interesting, because when I got to the church, I said, "Can I go up into the spire to take it?" But little did I suspect that it was just it was a metal ladder just hanging off the side of the wall that I'd climb up, and then through a hatch onto the balcony. There are some eccentrics in the village. This is Graham. Graham's well known for riding about on his penny farthing. as I say, all of these photos spark conversations between people in the village. Um, I can remember this photo. This is the only photo that I had to retake. And originally I took it without, they weren't wearing masks, and suddenly they realised that it wasn't the best example. So I went back and took it again. Um, this baby, I can remember, this baby was, Clemmy was 3 weeks old when I photographed her. She was actually born, a week before the lockdown. Um, this is the local beekeeper, Simon, who runs courses in the village. And this was a request. This is Helen. Helen doesn't actually live in the village, but she's the local every delivery driver. And lots of people contacted me and said, "Can you photograph Helen? Because she's so important." And this is the last photo that I made during the lockdown. And Johnson was actually speaking as I made this portrait. And the lady told me the reason that she'd not contacted me earlier was that she'd run out of hair dye and her hair was completely white and she didn't want to be photographed without it. But then suddenly realised that she wanted a photo in the book. And it was quite interesting that I sold 2 copies of the book to one family, and they'd actually sold their house and they wanted to leave a copy of the book for the occupants. As I say, this book was published, printed, and delivered 80 days after the first photo was taken, and that was largely thanks to Stewart being able to edit it for me. I did actually go to the printers to collect them, and it was a bit of a thrill, really. It was my first book. It was A4 landscape, and I'd already got my licensure in the summer of 2020. And I applied for an associate in contemporary photography with this book and was awarded it, I think in the July. So it's done me a lot of favours, this book, really. When I was delivering the books, of course, the guy on the penny farthing, Graham's never one to miss a moment, and that was how he took his book off me and paid for it. I was going to take these photos out. I thought I'd take these photos out. Lockdown 3, I'll just tell you really quickly. I needed to make a project for my degree, and I went back and I didn't know what conditions were going to be when I designed the project. So I went back and I photographed a number of the families again through windows. This is Clemmy, now a year old, and I got people to write their experiences on postcards, a bit like it was modelled a bit on Jim Goldberg's Rich and Poor. So come this autumn of 2021, I was doing my degree, and one of the degree projects was to make some photos in the style of a famous photographer. And I'd been given a book by Todd Hido as a leaving present from work, and I decided that I would have a go at Todd Hido type project. And I'd made some photographs for a local theatre company, the Asylum Players, of a play called The Crucible by Arthur Miller. And Laura Turner was the star, and partly running the theatre company. And Laura's become a really close friend ever since. And Laura has written lots of poetry and done writing for me that we've worked together on photo books. But I gave Laura, went out in my car and made this picture, and sent the picture to Laura and asked Laura to write a poem in response to the picture, so that I could then give the poem to two young women that had agreed to act in the book for me. And the idea was that they would respond individually to the poem and characterize themselves, how they saw themselves from reading the poem. In the Todd Hido tradition, I went out and I made some houses at night, made some internal photos of houses, these photos were made during a house viewing in Kelso. The project took me 6 weeks. I think I made something like 5,000 photos. And I made photos outside, made photos, internal photos. And then I photographed the two people, Natalia and Lucy. But because I'd made photos during quite dramatic light, I'd only got one day with each of the models, and it was flat lighting on that day. So basically, I had to make some gobos and make some artificial light. So all the photos of the subjects are lit artificially to try and make it look like natural light. And these are the gobos that I actually made for that purpose. And I don't know if anybody knows what I'm talking about, but basically, if you imagine a flash and you put these boards between the flash and the subject, and you end up by casting interesting shadows either on them or on the wall. And this photo is from, I photographed a young acro dancer, but just to demonstrate how the gobbo works. And there's Natalia. The harder picture was the cat, Luna, who absolutely hates me, but trying to get the cat to stay still, a British short-haired cat. And again, this is artificial light designed to look like sunlight. And as I say, the idea of this book is that you construct the narrative yourself. Obviously, Lucy's not in that building. She's not in that house. They were taken 300 miles apart and a month apart. But the idea is that you imagine what's actually happening in that house. Same again. I'm quickly, I don't know if this is going to work or not. But these are the photos. And the book is something like, I've just shown you that to show you the scale of the book. I think it's 220 centimeters, 220 millimeters square, hardback. And again, I was really, really lucky with this. I applied for a fellowship in contemporary photography as a submission, and was awarded a fellowship in the April of 2022. So I managed to get my licentiate, associate, and fellowship in the space of about 6 months. So I was quite lucky with that. And subsequently, I won't talk about it too much, but subsequently, I've been appointed as the licentiate assessor for the Royal Photographic Society, and I also sit on the contemporary panel, the RPS, and on the photo book genre, which was launched by Stewart. And I've sat on that since the beginning. So I'm going to talk something about my bread and butter. I describe myself as a theatre and dance photographer, and that's my passion, really. I'm probably in the theatre or the dance studio at least 3 times a week. I work for quite a few local companies, and I also work for the university. And these photos are made again in the cathedral. This was a production of Hunchback of Notre Dame. I think I went even more over the top with this particular production, in that I attended, I think, 60 rehearsals, photographed every single show. It was a really enjoyable and exciting show, and we formed a collaboration with the University of Lincoln, and they provided about 10 or 12 of their contemporary dance students to go along with our actors. And Star in Lincoln is quite an unusual theatre company in that you don't have to audition to take part. The only auditions are for the main people. If you want to be in the ensemble, you just come along and be prepared to work and work really hard. And some of our actors, when they first start, they've never been on stage in their lives, but by the time that we get to actual production, the standard is really, really high. Again, I'm in costume and in makeup, and again, it was performed in the cathedral. And this is Ben. Ben was the director. And he gave me my first break really, and allowed me to play at being a theatre photographer. I've also worked for other companies like Chapter House. Unfortunately, Chapter House has now gone into receivership, but I used to go on tour with Chapter House quite a lot. This is taken in a theatre on the Wirral. And this photograph is actually made with a 300mm lens from a private box during an actual show. And I always thought this was a bit painterly, this photo. I work for a local youth theatre company called Joe Lear Theatre Arts. Joe does lots of dance shows, lots of cabaret shows, lots of children's shows. And I'm lucky enough to get invited to photograph these. But this particular company, I don't go to rehearsals. I just tend to do either the show or the dress. But again, the photos are all published on Flickr. Most of my photographs are published free on Flickr so that they're free to download. And for my paying customers, they pay for me to be there, and then I give them the photos for nothing, basically. My biggest company at the moment is the Silent Players. As mentioned Laura earlier, they're playing productions put on in the Blue Room. We put on about six or so shows a year. Semi-professional, professional actors. We've done things like 1984, Macbeth, Frankenstein. We've just done Streetcar Named Desire, and we're just doing The Graduate at the moment. And these photos here are unusual in that I go to read-throughs. I always start the process, or I try and start the process, if I can, by going to the read-throughs. And it's a way of introducing yourself to the actors, but it's also, I think you get some quite interesting chemistry shots, and something that photographers wouldn't normally go anywhere near. People sat around a table reading from a script, but I really enjoy it. And for me, it's the process really that's as important as the actual photographs. And I just enjoy being there, and I use my camera as a bit of a passport, really. Again, I make photos in rehearsals and during the actual shows. My company is a side name for my company is Anything But Weddings. The one wedding that I photographed was done in here, and that was Laura that you saw earlier, photographed her wedding, and she told me that she wanted me to photograph it like a play, so it was something I was able to do. Again, these are more photos from the Asylum Players. And because I never learned how close you could get and whether you could go on the stage or not, I tend to get really close to actors, and most of my photographs, when at all possible, are made with a 35mm lens. And that proximity to the actors, I think, comes through in the photographs. But you can only get that close if you know the plays and if the actors know you and trust you. And you only really get that by producing the work and not being a nuisance and not being in the way. Although I'm sure that sometimes I do get in the way. Again, these are some more productions, Vicar of Dibley and a couple of Christmas shows, and Frankenstein bottom left, which was an absolutely tremendous show. So I don't know if you can remember earlier, I talked about Katie, who was 14 when I first met her. Well, you can see her stood with the black robe at the back of this photograph. And I got a phone call about 18 months ago, or got an email about 18 months ago saying that they'd got a production of Les Mis, children's production of Les Mis at a local theatre in Grantham. And they wanted to know if I was available to come and photograph it. And Katie had put my name forward as being a photographer that they might use. I got there and was absolutely astonished by the standard of acting, the costumes, an absolutely brilliant production. And again, you can only really get these photos by being close. And they were obviously pleased with the photos because I turned we had two dress rehearsals, two casts on the same day, and I think I sent the photos through at 3 o'clock that morning. And the next day, the company, who was New Youth Theatre for Grantham and Lincoln, Yvette, contacted me and booked me to do 28 more shows. And I think I've got 40 shows to do for New Youth Theatre this year because I'm doing Newark as well now. And it's I people pull a face sometimes when I tell them what I do, but I've done lots of shows for New Youth Theatre, and this is Aladdin. So Grantham and Newark have both got two senior casts and two junior casts. And each of them put on their own dress rehearsal. So basically, I have to do Aladdin 8 days on the trot, 8 shows on the trot. But I mean, I've the photos that you're looking at here are of the genie. The interpretations that the kids put on the different, to say that they're all using the same script and they've all got the same direction, their approach to the role is completely different. So although I have to do 8 shows in 8 days of the same thing, I genuinely don't get bored of it. And the photos from this one are taken at a theatre in Lincoln that's sort of in the round, and you're level with there's no raised stage, so I can actually get on the stage with the actors, and makes for some quite interesting photos, I think. This is a photo from a show I did 2 or 3 months ago. I was contacted by the lady in the dress in the middle of the second photograph, Jane. She organises Lincoln Book Festival, and I do all the photos for Lincoln Book Festival. I've done for a couple of years. And she contacted me and said, can you come and photograph 5 lesbians eating a quiche? And I must admit, I thought it was a joke at first. But I turned up at Wickham Theatre, and that was the production. It's an American show from off-Broadway. Absolutely hilarious. And the reason that I'm showing this photograph is that although I publish lots and lots of photographs in support of plays, sometimes producers and directors ask me to hold photos back. And this was a photo that they wanted me to hold back because this was the penultimate bit of the play and they didn't want the audience to see this. So basically, I take the photo and then hold it back and then publish it afterwards. But absolutely fantastic production. And the other thing about being at a dress rehearsal is often it's just me and the director watching, although on this occasion I'd also got quite a cute dog watching with me as well. A couple of years running, Chapter House Theatre Company asked me to go on tour with ABBA, or 21st Century ABBA, who are a really good tribute band, although I've heard probably as much ABBA as I want to now. But I used to go on tour with them and do the stage lighting and photography for the show. That was really interesting experience and unbelievably hard work as well, to be fair. But we had some real interesting times on tour, some quite interesting hotels, quite interesting audiences. Having done, I mentioned earlier that when I photographed Hunchback of Notre Dame, that the university were involved, and the university, the choreographer was Kirsty from the university. And she subsequently contacted me and asked me if I'd go and photograph contemporary dance for the university. And it was a bit of a shock for me. I'd already done ballet. I'd been employed as a ballet photographer. And although that was quite a steep learning curve, ballet is, I find, quite easy in that they tend to set off in a direction and keep going in that direction. Whereas contemporary dance, it's almost like police officers walked into a room full of students and shouted, "It's a rave," and then they all run off in opposite directions. You've no idea how long the dance is going to last for, how many people are going to be on stage, how many people are going to disappear and then come on again, and you've no idea what they're going to do at any minute. So it's a bit like clay pigeon shooting, but really, really interesting and really enjoyable. Um, I've got a dance show to do for the university next week, contemporary dance show. And I have in the past asked for a set list, and it's a complete waste of time because there'll be 35 dance routines. Uh, and it's all done in the dark. So you've got absolutely no chance of keeping up. But what I tend to do is I tend to get the wide, easy shots at the beginning of a routine and try and photograph everybody at the beginning of a routine. And then I can start to experiment with movement when I know that I've got the photographs in the bag. And it's really important that I get them because the students use the photos as part of their final assessment. So it's really important that I hit all the important points. But unfortunately, I haven't got a clue when they're going to be. So I just have to hope that I get it. But
So,
I've been,
Richard, there's a couple of questions there, and one of them is relevant to what you're talking about now. Liz has asked whether you have a shot list at all.
no,
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 no.
no, no. They, it, it would be a waste of time giving me one because, as I say, the show lasts 2.5 hours. This particular show lasts 2.5 hours. There's 35, at least 35 different routines. And you've doing it on your own in the dark. You've absolutely no idea. You just have to be able to respond to what's happening at that moment and capture it.
Yeah,
I'm I'm a very mobile photographer in that I'm running around all the time. And you just got to be on it. And you're making a lot of photographs. A lot of them get thrown away. But it's just a skill like anything else to it. It's just practice.
yeah,
And I never worry that I'm not going to get it. And you learn to anticipate what's going to happen after a while.
brilliant. Thank you. And Jill was saying, what's your biggest challenge with making photographs in the theatre arena?
Well, the biggest challenge, the biggest challenge is lighting because everybody's using LED lights now. Um, and if you can't use electronic shutter, which I learned quite early on, I got back from Hunchback and found that loads of my photos got banned in and I had to throw everything away.
Yeah, I remember that.
So you've got to use mechanical shutter. So you need a quiet camera. And that basically is why the Olympus worked for me. If I bought a Canon 5D, I would never have been a theatre photographer because they wouldn't have tolerated me. I'd have just been too disruptive. Um, but I think the biggest challenge is being trusted, Stuart.
Yeah,
Um, I used to give all my time for nothing to start off with. Um, and it's only by turning the photos round and keeping people happy, I'm a bit of a people pleaser, that I've been successful really. And people know that they're going to get the photos. I went to the theatre today between 12 and 1:30 to photograph the graduate. But I still publish them at 3 o'clock today. You just get into a workflow really and be efficient. I, I I have heard of photographers taking a long time to turn work around, and I find that if you publish it on the day, everybody's still interested and they want to see it and they will look at it, and it's really useful for publicity as well.
yeah, lovely. Thank you.
So these are just some more. Let's say that particular shot was made on the Olympus. He only did it once, and I'd know it. He'd got to do it, and it's a bit of luck and a bit of being in the right place at the time, and always looking through the lens. I very occasionally go um, as a genuine audience member to watch something, and I find the experience is completely different because when I'm in the theatre watching through the lens, I haven't really got a clue what's going on with the story, what's happening, because all I'm concerned about is where everybody is in relation to everybody else. Um, so in addition to making um, all the photography for the university for the contemporary dance course, a couple of years ago they asked me if I'd go and do the headshots for the students. So these are just a few examples. I'm actually going on the 23rd of this month to do the students, and it's quite an interesting experience. I have 30 students, 2.5 hours, and I do the theatre and stage management course and the dance students. Uh, they all turn up first thing in the morning, bleary-eyed, so they need waking up. But basically, they all come into a dance studio together and then spend the morning making TikToks while I pull them out one by one and photograph them for their headshots. It's just really simple photography, but it is good fun, and they seem to enjoy it. And you can get a bit of a vibe going. The only mistake that I have made the first year, I was invited to participate in this TikTok, and I don't think it's anything that I'll ever live down. Something that I'm not going to get involved in again. But I quite enjoy doing the student headshots, and I do proper actor headshots where I'll just have one actor for a couple of hours and make them. But this is a bit of a conveyor belt job. And we start off by doing the straight shots, and then we do the hair swishing and jumping about, just have a bit of fun generally. And that, to be honest, is my motivation, really. I never intended to be a professional photographer. My ambition was just to find something to do, and it's all been a bit of an accident, really. So, as a bit of a spin-off from doing the contemporary dance, I was approached by the Dance Society, which is the biggest society in the university, to do their shows. And I've done lots of shows for the Dance Society. And then a couple of years ago, they asked me to go to their ball, which is at the Hilton in Lincoln. It's difficult to say no, really, with that backdrop and the fact that they all dress up. And it's really easy, fun photography. But again, it's just being part of the community, really, something that I enjoy. How are we doing for time, Stuart? I think we're on time, aren't we?
Yeah, you're well on time, Richard. Actually, Graham asked a question. He's very impressed with how you're able to take, process, and publish the images on the same day. He's
Yeah.
interested in what your processing workflow is like. Do you shoot JPEGs and
No,
process minimum, or do you capture raw and then have to do lots of processing
no,
afterwards?
I don't do lots of processing. I shoot raw unless I'm shooting sport outside, and then occasionally I shoot JPEG. But I bring everything into Lightroom, and I'll talk a bit about the transplant later. But I bring everything into Lightroom. I go through the photos once. I give all the ones that I want a one, throw everything away, assuming I've got about the right number. I then just batch process them. I try not to crop them. I try because that's like an extra 5 seconds for each photo. So I try to crop in camera. Um, I underexpose to protect the highlights, uh, noise reduction, basic processing, really, Stuart. Um,
And how
but
do you handle the white balance in the theatre?
well, I mean, if you look at this photo, I'm not trying to make it look natural. With theatre photography, you've got to respect the lighting designer. You know, they've given the stage a colour, and it's your job really to keep that colour. So what I haven't shown, because I've not shown a lot of rehearsal photos, it's normally my rehearsal photos are done in black and white, and my production photos are done in colour. And the reason for that is that during rehearsals, they're wearing a mishmash of colours, and it can look a right mess. Um, but I let the white balance largely sit on its own, Stuart. Uh, and this is a ballet company that I worked for about 4 years, and I've made books with them. Used to photograph them a lot. I've just stopped that association with them. But absolutely fantastic. And if you look at the photo on the left-hand side here, Sometimes during productions, I'll photograph across the stage when the audience is in. So the photograph on the right was made during the dress, and then I stayed for the actual production and then shot across the stage. Some of my I think, most interesting photos are taken across the stage. Can be really difficult because you've got bright light shining straight at you, but really interesting. Uh, so I was working with the Italian players and we were doing calendar girls, and we decided to do a calendar um, for sale during the show to raise money for the local charity. Um, and because of the play, I mean, I'm sure everybody knows Calendar Girls. It's a domestic setting, so I offered to shoot it at my house. So I'd come back and have a difficult conversation with my wife. And it's quite funny because the actors from Calendar Girls were actors that I didn't really know because we'd had to bring people in because we needed ladies of a certain age. This was really the first time that I'd worked with them. And so it was quite an interesting experience for them all to turn up at my door, quite nervous in order to try and shoot this calendar. And these are the sort of photos that we made during the day. This is actually, I borrowed next door's garden for these photos, for this and the next photo, I think. And we made a different shot for each month. And the way that we did it was that they were sat in robes and I staged it and set it up and lit it because they're all lit while they were in the robes. And then I turned my back and they disrobed and then I made the photographs. But by the end of the day, everybody was in absolute hysterics and it was causing a bit of a scandal in the close. This is Sally in the wheelbarrow that I bought specially for this purpose. As I say, everybody, I think partly due to the Prosecco, but everybody was just had a really good day. This is Sarah in front of my dresser in the kitchen. And this was the one that upset Donna the most in that it was May, it was absolutely boiling. And I asked her if she would dress the sitting room for Christmas, just for this one shot, but I think it works quite well, really. And we did sell the calendar. We made quite a tidy sum for the local cancer charity, so it was worth doing. Right. So this is the only job that I sort of appointed myself to. Everything else, really, I've been invited to do. But in about 2019, myself and my wife decided that we were going to have a go at ballroom dancing, which was an absolute disaster. But we did meet a couple whose son had died at 16, and they'd made the really difficult decision to donate his organs to other people. And they mentioned that they were going to Newport in Wales to go to the transplant games. And I was quite intrigued by this story and sort of myself and my wife booked an Airbnb for 6 days and we went down to the transplant games to see what it was all about. And of course, I took my camera and uninvited, because they didn't have a photographer, I just started to make photographs during the transplant games. For people that don't know, the transplant games are every year British. There's also European and Worlds. All the participants have received a full organ transplant, or they're a living donor. And then there's a special group of people called the donor families that you can see with the butterflies here. And these are families whose relatives have died and donated organs. I find it absolutely fascinating. I've been doing it for 6 years now. The games there's 25 different sports. The standard is very variable. There's really good athletes. There's people who are just there to participate. They all represent their individual hospitals. So it's Birmingham adults, Bristol adults, Edinburgh, Great Ormond Street. There's children's teams. And some of the stories are unbelievable. There's a young lad who goes for the Bristol team, who's from the Falkland Islands, but he has his treatment in Bristol. He flies from the Falkland Islands once a month, once every other month, to go to Bristol for his treatment. And they've been such a welcoming community. The first year I went to the British and the World Games in Birmingham, uh, and subsequently the event organisers invite me and my wife to go every year, and they put us up, look after us, and I make all the photos, uh, make lots of photos for the press, lots of stories for the press and for the BBC, uh, and they're just the easiest community. This couple here, I absolutely love this couple. I met them at the first games, the boyfriend girlfriend, or they were boyfriend girlfriend. And when I first met them, he was waiting for a kidney transplant and she was girlfriend. And they're both actually renal nurses. They're both kidney nurses. And I take the same photo of them every year and have done for 6 years. But they got married last year, and they were part of a kidney swap. You can't give kidneys cross race, or you can't give organs cross race. So she basically gave up her kidney to someone, so that he could receive a kidney. And they were both in hospital at the same time, giving and receiving kidneys. So it's the nicest story, really. I'm quite upset, really, because they got married last year and they've now emigrated to Australia, and they're both working as kidney nurses in Australia. But I do keep in touch with them. So just to give you some idea of the reach, so this is an example from 3 or 4 days in 2024. I make the photos and publish them and share them on social media. And on this particular day, I think I had 220,000 hits in the day, 150,000, nearly 250,000. And in a week of making photos at the games, I'll get 750,000 hits on Flickr. And transplants only happen because people are aware of the need for transplants. So they do genuinely find the images really important for sharing the news about transplants. And these are just some of the photos. The little girl on the right there who's smiling at me, I was asked by a newspaper last year to photograph this girl for a story that they were doing. And I went to see her first thing in the morning. She didn't want to know. She was just hiding in her mum's t-shirt. But by the end of the day, she was actually running out at me so that I would take photos of her. But they're just a fantastic community. And when you think that all of these children um, have had an organ transplant, it's really traumatic. I haven't got the photo here, but I photographed a young girl at Newcastle, and she'd got a crop top on. She was like 6, and she'd got a crop top on, and she got a huge scar on her stomach. And it was a really nice photo. And I showed her mum the back of the camera and said, I don't know what to do about this photo. And her mum said to me, she's really proud of that scar, and without that scar, she'd be dead. So can you please publish the photo?
That's
So
brilliant.
sometimes you make assumptions about how people feel about, things, and you're completely wrong. Um, this is Vicky. Vicky sadly died last year. And this is another important part of my albums on Flickr, in that they are a fragile community. We do lose people on a regular basis, and they find the photos really quite important.
Well, Richard, one thing leads to another, and Joe Smeaton is in the audience, who has just pointed out that the transplant games are in Sheffield this year,
They
which
are
is,
just, they've
and
booked me. It's the
yeah,
6th to the 9th of August.
yeah. Well, on the 8th of August, Joe has invited you to the Crown Green Bowling event, which he is hosting. He says you're
Oh,
very welcome.
fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've done bowling once, I think at the World Games. It's difficult for me in that there's 2,000 competitors, there's 25 sports, and there's just me. Um, and I do the whole lot. I normally take about 3,000 photos a day. Um, and I just go where there's most bang for my buck, really. So I tend to keep away from tennis because there's just two people playing. So I tend to go for the sports where there's lots of participation. And some sports do get a bit neglected, like 10-pin bowling, because it's always in a remote location. There's never many people doing it, and it's dark. So I go bang for buck, really. But this is the World Transplant Games in Newcastle. And I was attracted to this young girl because all the teams from all over the world were coming through. And she was the only athlete from Ethiopia. So I photographed her. And then I subsequently photographed her during the 5,000 meters. And then later on, I saw her in the car park with this chap that you see her with. And they were talking some African language to one another. And I went up and I asked who he was. And she told me that he'd paid for her transplant. And he'd got a charity in Ethiopia providing transplants for people in Ethiopia. So some of the stories are incredible, really. Um, this is taken at the European Games in European Transplant Games. And I kept away from the swimming for the first couple of years because I thought people would be sensitive about me photographing them in the swimming pool. But after a couple of years, people were saying, why don't you come and photograph us at the swimming? So I now always go to the swimming. This is at Blenheim Palace. This was the European Games 2 years ago. And this is Bera, who is the poster girl of transplant sport for Germany. And Bera is always good value for providing the photographer's pose for you. They are an unusual community, and you think that they would be really precious about their health, and they are, but they also really like to party. And when I went to the European Games, they got a dodgem, and I rather foolishly put a flash on my camera, got in with a Romanian driver, and partook in the dodgems, taking photos, which was quite fun. We normally get some personalities to come, and that's Susie Dent at last year's games with my wife and Adam Isaac. Adam had a kidney transplant last year. He won the first year of The Voice. This chap, Paul, on the left, Paul's quite an unusual, well, a very unusual man. He's called an altruistic donor. And Paul woke up on his 65th birthday and suddenly decided, having watched a television program, that he wanted to give a complete stranger his kidney. And that's precisely what he did. We went to the local hospital and said, can I give my kidney for you to give to someone? And Paul's really interesting, really genuine, nice man. This is a policewoman that I used to work with, and I can remember 20 years ago, her taking time off work to give her daughter her kidney. And it was quite a surprise to see them at the games this year. Joe Brand did the closing ceremony at the games last year. And I get to do photograph things like archery, get lots of articles in the papers. And this is what the Flickr albums look like, and the albums get opened quite a lot, really. So as I think we're still doing all right. As a knock on from that, MLS are the event company that run the transplant games. Yuri, who runs the company, contacted me a couple of years ago and said, do you fancy going to the World Blind Games in Birmingham and being one of the photographers? He said, it's really easy, Richard. There's 50 photographers. We'll put you up in the Athletes Village. It's on for 12 days, he said, but you just come for as little or as much as you want. So I agreed to go. Me and my wife went 12 days. What Yuri didn't tell me was, although there were 50 photographers, 49 of them worked for news agencies and newspapers and television stations. And I was the only photographer working for the games. So again, I had to cover the whole thing again. 11 sports. This is different in nature to transplant sport in that it's Paralympic level. So it's very serious qualifying sport. And as I say, there were 11 11 different sports. And it was horrendous. It nearly killed me. It was 12 days. I took up to 6,000 photos a day and managed to process and publish them. I'm not quite sure how I did it. But I had some unusual sports to do, and one of them was chess. The way that the blind games happens is there's three categories. There's completely blind, B1. B2 are people who can see up to 20 metres. B3 are people who can see up to 50 metres. And they do have to have medical certificates. And for the B1 players, people who are completely blind, they have to wear blindfolds as well. But I did wonder how I was going to photograph chess. But it was actually one of the tensest things at the games. And although I wasn't present when it happened, allegedly one of the coaches slapped one of the players, and it wasn't their player. And they subsequently had to get a police community sport officer to sit in the chess to try and keep the peace. This is semi-blind football, really, really fast, really high standard, really exciting. That was held at Wolverhampton University. This was an occasion when I had to go to the 10-pin bowling. And rather foolishly, I asked if I could stand in the gutter. And I've asked this question before, and everybody's always said, no, don't be stupid. But on this occasion, they said, yes, of course you can stand in the gutter. So I got the opportunity to actually photograph somebody from the front, which was nice. But again, really fun, really exciting. Blind archery is a sight to behold. The way that blind archery happens is they are blindfolded. The athletes are blindfolded. And if you can see he's got a tripod, he sets that tripod up with his coach and puts his hand against the back of it. And that's how they decide where the hand position should be. And he has to then move it 3 inches away and let the arrow go. And the standard it's as good as sighted archery, really. And again, using Olympus gives you the opportunity to get the arrow in flight, which is something that I don't think you can do with many cameras, really. Blind judo was a real experience. Because it's largely a contact sport, the standard is phenomenal. And it's quite interesting to watch the players move around the court. What happens is they come in a train. Basically, they'll have a sighted person at the front, and then somebody stood behind them with a hand on the shoulder. And there'll be a chain of 12 or 13 people coming and moving about. But when they're fighting, you'd never know. You'd never know that they're blind. Just fantastic standard. Really quick, difficult to photograph again. And I've got sharp shots, but I like to play about with movement sometimes. This is the Bangladeshi, and if you remember this photo for later, this is the Bangladeshi cricket team. And the guy back left with his hands up, he still follows me on Instagram. He's their team manager, but a really happy bunch of players, of cricketers. This was one of the high points for me, really. I went to Edgbaston, which is one of the test grounds in Birmingham for the final of the ladies' cricket and for the final of the men's cricket. But I got to travel to the cricket on the Indian ladies team bus, which was a fantastic experience. Blind cricket is interesting. There's 3 completely blind players, 3 nearly blind players, and the rest can't see at all, see very far at all. But you wouldn't know to watch them play. The batsman tends to have his knee on the floor. They bowl underarm, but they're smashing it all over the place. They were playing on a full-size test wicket. It was really interesting. A sport I'd never seen or even heard of before is goalball, and that's an Olympic sport. And basically, there's 2 nets, 9 meters wide, 3 players. They're all blindfolded. The crowd is completely silent. It's got to be silent during most blind sports because the athletes have to try and listen for what's happening, listening for the ball. And what happens is they've got this big ball and they just roll it towards the other net. And then the players throw themselves and try and save it. But a really athletic, fast, exciting sport. This is the Ukrainian team. And you can see the sweat coming off him. Well, I hope you can see it on Zoom. But again, difficult to photograph because it's just you're working at really high ISOs all the time. And in contrast with the Bangladeshi cricket team, they were really happy. This is the Iranian goalball team. And I think this is almost my favourite photo from the games. I did ask them to smile, but that was the best that the Iranians could give me, really. This is blind football, which is unbelievable, really. It's five-a-side, six-a-side. The goalkeeper is sighted. Behind each goal is the coach, and he's the only person who is allowed to talk. And he tells the players where the ball is and where the other players are. And it's absolute bedlam. So they come running onto the pitch with no idea where the pitch is, really. But the standard of football and the bravery and the speed of the players is mind-boggling, really. This is an Argentinian running between two Chinese players at full speed, completely blind. And it's just bonkers, absolutely bonkers, but a real privilege to see it close up. This is my naivety. I've not photographed football before, and this is a penalty shootout in the semi-finals. And this is me just behind the ball, behind the goal, and that ball literally skimmed off the top of my head. And I couldn't understand why all the other photographers were further off to the side, but I did realise after that. This is the Argentinian captain celebrating winning the world final, going to Paris. At the closing ceremony, I'd not met this person, but this is Jazz Gardosi, who was the poet laureate for Birmingham, and they'd written a poem about the games, and it was absolutely phenomenal, really, really emotional. And my wife came up to me and said, "You ought to do a photo book working with Jazz and her poem." And I did mention it to the chair of British Blind Sport. And a couple of weeks later, I was contacted and asked to make a commemorative book of the games that could be given to all the different countries and all the different. But it was an unusual request in that it had to be blind friendly. So I had to make an electronic version that could be read using that a blind person could use with audio descriptions for the photographs, and also incorporating the poem. It wasn't the easiest book I've ever made because they'd got a lot of input on what photos they wanted and how they wanted it doing, but really interesting project to do.
And I remember that book, Richard. I think you had to deal with the text in a different way than you might normally do.
Yeah, very much so. So it's bigger text than normal, and again, it had to work with an electronic reader.
Yeah.
But they're all learning experiences, aren't they? It's all an opportunity, and I'm really proud of that book. Um, there's a few hundred copies, and they're all over the world, really. And I actually got paid for that as well, which was nice.
Very nice.
So I was lucky. I got my degree. Me and my wife and my son all graduated together. I applied to do a master's degree at Leeds Art University, which is about 2.5 hours away. And my wife applied for a master's, but she ended up by doing a PhD, and she's just got her doctorate, but she's cleverer than me. But I went to Leeds Art University, and my intention was to make photo books. And I ended up by submitting 3 photo books. I did my master's degree over 2 years. I know you can do it in a year, but I was only really doing it because I wanted to spend some time making work. And I I made three books basically. One was called Ballerina, which I won't be showing, although it is available on my website. And that was, I followed a young ballerina all the way through rehearsals at a show and incorporated writing from her and from a teacher. But I made a book with Lucy, who I've worked with a lot. I first met her at Oliver, and we wanted to make a photo book explaining how someone with a dissociative disorder sees the world, how it can be disruptive and confusing. She'd moved to London, so I made two trips to London, and this is the space. London flat's really small, and this is the space that we had to work in. And I didn't know at that time how the book was going to be structured. I knew that I wanted some writing, so I went to Laura, and Laura wrote a poem for me, that working with Lucy to make sure that the poem reflected the experience of somebody with an anxiety disorder. And I'm just showing this photo, Stuart, because this is straight off camera on the left, and this is the photo that I produced on the right. And all 99.9% of my photography, no, that's not quite true, is it? Nearly all of my photography is done in camera. I go into Photoshop twice a year. I'm not interested in applying effects after the fact. I only want to really make the images in camera. I personally don't get any satisfaction from the post-processing. It just doesn't work for me. And it doesn't work for my workflow because I haven't got time to be spending 2 days on a photograph. So I try and get it right in camera. But these are some of the photos that we made on those two shoots. And it was all in order to articulate this story. And on here are some of the prints that I made and some of the dummies that I made. So I made a little zine, I made a concertina book, I made a couple of hardbound books. But having seen a book by a Japanese photographer with two transparent images in it, I thought that what might work for this project would be to work with tracing paper. So I set about at university working out how to print on tracing paper, which isn't actually quite as easy as I thought it was going to be. And we ended up by using a laserjet printer to print. And I'm just going to show a few seconds of the book to demonstrate how it works. There's a lot of wind noise on this because Laura's reading out the poem outside. But what I wanted to do was to incorporate the words in the poem into the book with the images. And I wanted you to have a relationship with the images as you turn the page, and for the images to change as you turn the page. So just go. So the words of the poem are on the left, and then there's overlapping images on the right. And the images change as you turn the page. I'm actually working with a photographer at the moment to try and make a nice version of this book.
My memory is a broken thing, swirling and dancing in the dark.
But this book, Stuart, this book went through a lot of iterations and a lot of different versions in order to get something like this. It wasn't something that, I did in a weekend or in a day. And I think this is sometimes when you're designing a book using a template and just throwing images onto the template, you end up with a book that isn't as interesting as it might be. Does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And even, I don't know if I've got the versions down here or not. No, they're upstairs. But even, the initial versions trying to get the text into the right place on the images is quite a lot of trial and error and a lot of messing about, really. And it is worth getting it right if you possibly can. So
this might be a question you want to answer a little bit later, Richard, but Jill asked where you see yourself in 5 years in terms of creative direction, because we're seeing quite a few different directions here.
Well, it'll be a lot more. The truth is, Stuart, I'm coming to the end of my career, really. So I'm trying to, and because I started so late, I'm trying to jam it all in, really. I'm just almost making the work for me is more interested in the collaborations that I have with people, because I'm not interested in doing things on my own. Everything that I do really is collaboration. I'll just keep going until I can't go anymore, really.
Another quarter of a century then. And this
Not really. So the next book I'm going to talk about is my my biggest book, really. And it's really not finished. It was submitted for my degree, for my master's degree, and it was successful. It's been seen by quite a lot of people who really enjoy it. And I met Emily in the Theatre for Asylum Players. Well, I met her at Hunchback of Notre Dame. But when Lucy left and went to London, I wanted someone new to work with. So I approached Emily and said, would you be prepared to make some work? And at first, we just made pictures. And we made pictures almost every week for about 4 months. And my tutor at university kept saying, what are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? And I said, I don't know at the moment. We're just playing, really. We're just making images. But a story emerged, a narrative emerged, that Emily's cousin, who we now found out is her great aunt, had lived and died in the same house as her, had the same career, had died at the age that Emily was when we made the work, and we'd got her diaries, and we'd got her letters, and we'd got photographs. So we wanted to make a book to sort of look at the lives of Emily and of Ethel. And these are some of the images from the book, and I'll show you a little video of the book so you can understand a bit better. But this book is a mixture of archive material, photos of Ethel, photos of Emily, but also writings from Emily and writing from Ethel as well. And the way that the book is structured is that it's French fold with the fold at the bottom. And there's archive material between the pages. This is a photo, on the left is a drawing done by Ethel in 1923, which is, I find, quite amazing, really. And this is a copy of her diary. It was made in 1920. The diary is actually about 2 inches by 1.5 inches. It's a tiny thing, and I have to read it with a magnifying glass. But I've mixed material, modern and old. So this is actually drawings done by Emily's mum. Photos of Emily. This is a hidden picture that's hidden between the pages, and the images are supposed to work together. This is Emily outside the shop that she works in. This is Greetstone Steps at Lincoln. And I've tried to incorporate the spiral bind into the book. And again, this was a massive task, and it still is, really. I started with concertina books and hardboard books and different formats, different sizes, different arrangements. Went through lots and lots of iterations, and it culminated in this book. And I'll just show you a few seconds, Stuart, so that you can see how the French fold works. So the archive material is hidden. Yeah. That's enough of that. But I was quite brave with this book, because I sent this book and another book that I did with Emily called 32 Miles to to Ted Forbes' Art of Photography. Never expecting it to be reviewed, but he reviewed it quite quickly after he received it. And I've not time to go into it, but I had quite a close association with John Blakemore, and I worked with John a lot. John was fantastically helpful to me. Sadly, we lost him this year. But I sent the books to Ted, and Ted reviewed them, and he was really, really positive about it. There's been some development since, in that I have explored how we might produce the book, and it's a nightmare to try and publish a book with French fold. It's really difficult, really expensive. And I took the book to a workshop that I did with Todd Hyde in south of France, and Todd was really, really, really supportive, really enjoyed it. But I subsequently showed it to Alessandro Sanguinetti at a Magnum workshop, and she was critical of most of the interesting material being hidden, and said, why is it all hidden? So I sort of took some of that on board and thought, well, we'll have a go. And Emily was happy to continue to work on the project, having a go at reshooting some of the images to try and have some more emotion and to try and incorporate more of the archive material with photographs of Emily. And we'd also come into possession of more material, so death certificates, letters about the death of Ethel, etc. And that's something that we're working on at the moment, and having a lot of fun making, really. But sometimes you have to go with your instincts and not listen to too many people. And I think Emily is sort of saying to me, stand firm and be brave and continue with what's working. It's never going to be a commercial book, but I tend to make books for me and the people that are in them, and then anybody else that's interested. But I'm really happy to continue to make work. So, still okay. So, current work. So, I met Maisie. Maisie is 22 years old. She works with Emily. So I've known Maisie for quite a while. We were doing a project on the Decemberists together. And Maisie's got quite an interesting background. Her mum was Chris Steele Perkins' nanny. Mum was a model, and the mum, quite sadly, has been quite poorly for most of Maisie's life. And Maisie asked me if we could make a book exploring the relationship of her and her mum. And never once turned down a challenge. I said yes, and her mum and dad are on board. They've provided quite a lot of archive material. I've got lots of photographs of her ancestors, and they're a really interesting bunch. Maisie and I have just started in the last couple of months to start to make images to explore how we might articulate this narrative that we have about her and her mum. And her mum was keen that Maisie would include her wedding dress in these photographs. And I spoke to her dad about the wedding dress, and her dad said, I could not believe this dress. I turned round when I got married and saw this vision coming towards me in this red cocktail dress. And this is actually Maisie's mum's wedding dress. And it fits her perfectly. And these are photos that are made in the cathedral, which I'll explain a bit more later. But I'm doing much what I did with Emily, in that we're just exploring ideas and making photographs and being comfortable with one another. And I've built a studio. Me and my wife built a studio at home that I'm sitting in now, that's just been finished. And Maisie came over last week, and we made these images with 2 torches. Again, some of them in a wedding dress, just to explore ideas, visual ideas for this book I'm making. But as I say, part of the fun with me is the collaboration and making images as much as it is the actual final product. So the next project I'm going to talk about is a non, and this was a bit of a bolt out of the blue, really. And I'm pleased that Tom's in the audience. But I got a really odd email last year saying, inviting me to participate in a project. And I thought it was a scam first. It sounded a bit like somebody who wanted to give me £18 million, but they wanted to collaborate on a project, and they'd seen my work and they were really happy with my work. And I'd been recommended to them by another photographer in Lincoln who I think they'd originally approached. And she said, I don't photograph people, you need to get Richard involved. And a non is a private choral assembly that is based at the cathedral. They're all professional singers and they sing anonymous music. So it's medieval choral music, absolutely stunning quality. But all the music has been written by people whose names was never known, or their names been struck by from the record because they were gay, or they were black, or they were Jewish or female, or whatever. And Tom is vice chancellor of the university of the cathedral. So fortunately, he's got lots of contacts and has got access to material. And I heard a piece. I won't play it now, but I heard a piece that they performed in Gloucester, and it basically nobody's heard this music since 1610, and it's just phenomenal that this music has never been performed, but nobody's interested in it because they don't know who it's by. But it's just, the music is just so beautiful, and it's really popular. But go on tour, and we have big audiences. And they asked me if I would make images initially of some of the choir. So they wanted headshots, they wanted weird photos, and they also wanted rehearsal photos and photos of them actually performing. So that's what I've been doing for the last few months, basically following them around and just being part of the choir, really. But it's been really interesting experience, and I'm quite proud to be photographer in residence for the choir. And a little while ago, Tom approached me and said, can we make a book? And obviously I'm never one to turn down the opportunity to make a book, but the idea of this book was that we would incorporate my photography and their writing and poetry about the concept of anonymity. And they gave me free rein to design it, although I'm working very closely with them to design it and make a book. And Tom has very kindly offered to host an exhibition of the photography from the book at the cathedral next month, and also for the choir to perform a recital at the exhibition, and for me and Tom to both give a bit of a talk about the work. So this is the flyer that we've produced, and it's just a placeholder, really. But on Saturday, the 21st of February, there'll be an opening at 10 o'clock. Then there'll be talks by me and Tom midway through the day, and then separately there'll be a 2-hour concert by the choir. But the book will be for sale, which is quite a tall order, really, because I've still not finished it. But what I'm going to do, I'll just escape. Now, don't take too much notice of this, but I'm just going to very quickly flick through some of the pages. So the book is going to be 210 centimetres square. So it's going to be like this book. We've extensively rewritten and are re-editing it, but this is sort of how it will sit. So there'll be writing about anonymity, and it'll be paired with images that I've produced, some of which I've produced for the book, some of which I've drawn from other projects. And it's going to be about 120 pages, and it's going to be for sale at the exhibition, online, and during a non-concert. And this image here that you can see is a collaboration that I did with Emily when we made a book called 32 Miles. I made the photograph, printed it out and gave it to her, and then she applied the artwork to it. But it's an absolutely beautiful image, and it's, you know, one of the images that will be included. This is Lucy from the Tracing Paper book. It won't look quite like this, you know, it will be edited. And this is an image that I made in the Faroe Islands on my retirement. Rosie, obviously, Emily. And then it finishes off with some writing about me and some writing about Tom. So I think when it's finished and I've got a week to do it, it could be quite an interesting project. Well, it will be an interesting project. I just hope that people buy the book. So I've not put too much into here, but my personal projects are all paid for by my commercial work, and every job I've got has been a result of another job. I do conferences for the university. I do conferences for a local art centre. I'm artist in residence for Lincoln Book Festival. I work for a Soul Festival, and basically I think they call it grip and grin, don't they? But there's more to it than that, and I quite enjoy interacting with people and photographing people. I mentioned Kirsty earlier, who was the dance teacher for the university, and one of my most unusual commissions was she contacted me to tell me that she was very pregnant, and she said, "Can you come and do my bump photos?" Which was something, I have to admit, that I never thought I'd do. It wasn't something that I advertised, never done it. And I never thought I'd get the opportunity to do it, really, because it tends to be done by females on a trust basis. But I know Kirsty really well. She said that her husband was up for being photographed, but wasn't comfortable being photographed. And I went to her house with her friends, and we spent a really enjoyable day making photos of her bump. And she wanted me to photograph like I do normally, to be fair. One ask that she gave me was that the cats be included. So we actually put catnip on her tummy, and that's how we got that photo. But we had a really nice day, and it was really, the light in the house is beautiful, so it's not hard, really. And she was really up for being photographed. And then when Lorianne was born, she was 10 days old, I was invited back to take photos of the baby, which was a fantastic experience. Really, really enjoyed it. We did have a discussion about doing the birth photos, but we didn't actually do that. But I wanted to recreate some of the photos. So Kirsty and her husband in the window, I want it with the bump and with the baby, but really, really enjoyed it. And I keep seeing photos of her now on Instagram, and she'd just grown so quickly. She was 5 pounds when she was born, and she was a tiny, tiny thing. But Kirsty specifically didn't want the modern newborn photos that are quite staged and very photoshopped. She wanted natural photos. This is a photo of Emily that we staged and made for Project 32 Miles, which was a comparison between Lincoln and Sutton and the experience of living in those two places. And I made several versions of this photo. This was the favourite one. But I submitted this last year to Taylor Wessing, which was the National Portrait Prize. and was shortlisted for the prize, which was quite a shock, really. And I printed it as a C-type and took it down to London and submitted it. I wasn't included, but we were shortlisted, and that was quite a thrill, really, and quite enjoyable. And portraiture is what I really enjoy doing. Right, so I'm going to put a couple more photos in of this, and this is not the best example. But the photo that I showed you at first, the first photo that I showed you, that I took in the Faroe Islands, that I snapped out of the car window, I was approached by the guy on the bench there, Duncan Collins, after I'd retired, and he said basically that he was building a new cell block at Nottingham, 55 cells, and that he wanted to improve the environment of the cells for the prisoners and thereafter for the welfare of the staff. And there's been lots and lots of research about cell environments and preventing harm. And basically, these are uncharged prisoners before they go to court. And when they come into the police station, all of their possessions are taken off them: laces, belt, watches, phones, photographs, anything that could be used to harm themselves. They're put in a cell and they're basically visited half hourly or hourly. Somebody looks through the window, says, "Oh, you're all right," and moves on. And there's no enrichment. And as a result of that, they get bored and they get up to mischief. And lots of people try and harm themselves. So cell design has been all about prevention of harm, but only removing ligature points and having low benches and nothing in the cell. But Duncan was quite innovative, and he looked at a photo at home and thought, well, looking at that photo makes me feel better, so surely having photos for prisoners would make them feel better. So he approached me and said, "Richard, do you think you can get me a photo that I can put in a cell?" And this has never been done before anywhere in the world, ever. It's been done since, but at that time, 2019, there was not a cell. And this is completely different to prison cells where people have their own property. This is police cells. And Duncan said, "Can you get me a picture?" And he gave me certain criteria. So now I know there's no people, no religious buildings, no religious symbols, no single trees they can imagine hanging themselves from, no forks in the road that they can imagine going down the wrong road. So I had a massive list of things that I couldn't do. And he said, "Oh, and by the way, I need it for 6 p.m. tomorrow." So I got up at dawn the next day and went to Sherwood Forest. I thought, I'll try and make some photos in the forest. And I did, and they didn't work. They were a bit rubbish. And I came back and I went through my archive and I found this picture, and I sent Duncan about 12 pictures and said, "There you go." And some of them I tried to test his boundaries by sending a picture of a deer and things, but Duncan picked this picture. And then he found out that applying a picture to a tile wasn't quite as easy as he thought it was. So he had to find an Italian company that could bake the picture into the tile so that it couldn't be scratched and it couldn't be removed. But it also meant that the life of the building is 40 years, that this blooming picture was going to be there for 40 years. So they decided to go ahead with the pictures in all of the vulnerable cells. And I was obviously at university at that time doing my undergraduate degree. So I wrote a paper. My dissertation was, is a picture the right thing to do? And did they pick the right picture? And I found lots of examples of art in hospitals and art in mental hospitals enhancing the mental health of people. Even astronauts, they found that nature reduced stress in astronauts. So it seemed that having a picture was the right thing to do. But obviously in a hospital, a picture, if people don't like the picture, they can swap it out. But this picture had got to work for everybody, which sort of put a bit of pressure on me. So I wrote this paper and forgot all about it and thought, I've done my good deed. They'd agreed to pay me, but didn't pay me, which is typical of police. But then I went to do my master's degree, and the police had come back to me and said, other police forces in Great Britain and around the world had approached Nottinghamshire because it had been publicised to see if they could use my picture. But none of them wanted to use the picture without some proper evidence that it worked. So I said to my art university, I need to go back and I need to talk to people in cells about their experience of being in the cells with a picture. And to cut a long story short, they really didn't want me to do it. It was an art university. They weren't used to social science. They were uncomfortable with me being with prisoners. So I had to find a supervisor at another university who agreed to supervise me. And I subsequently went to the police station and interviewed people on the bench, like that with Duncan, and asked them about their experience of being in the cell. And it got quite comical at times. I got to a point where I'd not photographed any females, and the number of female prisoners, uncharged prisoners, is sort of 1 to 10 for males. Men are much naughtier than girls, really, or got locked up a lot more. And I'd seen that there was a female locked up for breach of bail, just on a court order. So I asked the sergeant to move her into the cell and then waited for an hour for her to calm down so that I could go in and interview her. And I went in, and she subsequently told me that she'd been locked up for 35 hours. She'd been moved from another police force area, and that she'd been arrested for assisting an offender for a murder. She'd just had her first interview. And the penalty for that is life imprisonment. It doesn't get much more serious than that. And I was expected to find someone for breach of bail. But she did say that the picture had allowed her to focus her mind ready for the next interview, and that it had helped her collect her thoughts for the next interview. And I subsequently interviewed a child abuse detective who said she would much prefer to interview someone who's calm and collected rather than somebody who's wound up. So again, I published another paper and still continue to get inquiries about it now, to be fair. I've never really kept count of where it is. I know that other police forces have used it. And again, I can confirm that nobody's ever paid me for the license of that picture. Right, I think I've drawn it a bit early, Stuart, in order to do some questions, if anybody's got any questions.
We have, yeah. Thank you. Brilliant. Did you want to stop sharing your screen? Yeah, fabulous. Thank you. That's brilliant. Fabulous set of images, which we'll come back to in a moment. But let's go through the questions first, if that's okay.
Yeah, have I stopped sharing, or are we still sharing?
No, you're still sharing at the moment.
Let me just try and find the right screen.
I've just
it's all right, found it. Yeah,
fantastic. Thank you. Okay, so an equipment question first of all, if that's okay, from Phil. If it's the Olympus he uses, is it the new OM 1.2? Because Phil is interested, as Olympus tend to struggle in low light conditions and produce a lot of noise.
Yeah, I think that's nonsense, Stuart. I started with the OM1 Mark II.
Yep.
And then I bought the EM1 Mark II. That was the first car I bought. And then I went to the OM1 and the OM1 Mark II. What produces noise in low light is getting the exposure wrong and then having to boost the exposure up, and getting the shadows wrong and having to boost the shadows up. If you expose properly and don't boost the shadows, the noise is not intrusive. I shoot commercially all the time with Olympus in the very worst conditions. And it's a bit of a myth, I think, to be fair.
So I guess you're metering for the highlights and just allowing the shadows just to be what they are, shadows.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, if you try and what people mistakenly do with theatre images, they try and make it look like a normal picture, and it isn't. You know, the lighting person has lit the bits that he wants you to see.
Yeah.
You need to expose for that. So I tend to, I mean, the Olympus is worse than the Leica in that there's less latitude, but for the Olympus, I will normally underexpose by 1.3 stops,
Right.
and I'll spot meter for the highlights.
Yeah.
And then when I auto in Lightroom, I'll knock the shadows down to 20, and it's fine. It's fine. Honestly, it's fine.
Yeah.
And I regularly shoot at 12,800 and higher on the Leica, to be fair. But people, I think it's one of those things that people just repeat all the time, that Olympus can't do noise, and I don't think it's true.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I would agree with you, having used Olympus as well. So brilliant. Thank you. Good response. Um, Jill says she loves your books. They're performance pieces. Which is a great statement. And as you mentioned earlier on, Ted Forbes loved your book that you sent to him, and I hope he doesn't mind me saying, but he is in the audience tonight, so I hope that hasn't put too much pressure on you. But thank you, Ted, and Nicole for joining us. Um, Liz said or asked, and I think she's going back to the book printed onto tissue paper. Did the poem come first before the images, or did the images come first?
No. I got the concept with Luce, and I sent a sample of the images to Laura to write the poem. But I also got Lucy to write what we agreed, a text for what we were trying to show, and then Laura used her magical. I mean, Laura's phenomenal. She isn't here tonight, but she will listen to the recording. But Laura's a playwright, actor, creative director at. She owns a feminist theatre company that I work for. She's a fantastic writer, and she responded to the pictures.
Brilliant. So I guess in a way, it's like journalist work, isn't it? The press photographer is responding to the reporters writing.
Yeah.
But in your instance, it could become almost a game of table tennis where you're pinging the creativeness backwards and forwards between the two of you.
Yeah, and that's the process, and I'm doing that process with Tom now on the Anon book. It's something very much that it's a joint project. I mean, ultimately somebody has to make a decision, but hopefully we'll come to the right decision.
Yeah, deadlines are deadlines, aren't they?
Yeah.
So, and on that point, Jill says, how do you find the time for all of this alongside your theatre work? If you had to give up one, what would it be? I mean, I can answer that because you're normally up about 5 o'clock in the morning and
Yeah, I
squeeze
don't.
back into bed at three
I'm
o'clock in
really
the
lucky.
morning.
I don't sleep,
Yeah,
and I've also got. I mean, Donna's been doing a PhD, so she's been really busy. But I've also got a very understanding wife, so
yeah,
I'm allowed
yeah.
to.
Fantastic. Thank you. This asks, is Hazine your go-to book app?
Sorry?
The Hazine, which you showed the book
Yes.
to.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, I got that from you, Stuart.
yeah,
And I've got that for clients really, because if you send somebody a flat PDF, they struggle to see it as a book.
yeah,
But you can drop a PDF into Hazine. It's only £33 a year.
yeah,
And 10 seconds later, you've got a turning page book.
yeah. It's free for your first 5 books, and you can keep changing them if you like.
Yeah.
But the amount that you use them and the amount that I
Yeah.
use
I mean,
them,
I'd do it all the time. But
yeah, yeah, brilliant. Thank you. Um, so Phil says, yeah, I shoot with the M1.2 and 1.3, so agree. Brilliant. Okay, fantastic. Thank you, Phil. Jules, out of curiosity, are your wife and son also pursuing photography on a professional level? And would you
no,
recommend taking a photography degree as a mature student?
I would definitely. The only thing that I would say is be careful which photography degree you do. Now, my
Mm,
son my son did sports science and my wife's doctorate is in sports science. They're not. Having said that, I do a Soul Escapes festival, which is a, be careful how I say it, yoga, meditation retreat type thing. Really interesting. I get to photograph it every year, and they want video. I don't do video. I hate video. So I take my son, and he does the video. He's really good at video.
Brilliant.
But no, they don't. They're not photographers.
No, fantastic. I mean, on that point, I also did a degree in MA and PGCE, Jules. It's well worth doing, but you have to make it your own. And I think that's what you did, didn't you, Richard?
I
You made it
do,
your own.
and it can be quite challenging. I I got a lot, not criticism. I got a lot of male gaze things because I tend to work with, I tend because of the people I tend to work with. They tend, there was some suspicion about me, but I just work with my friends, and I'm in the theatre. I work with my actors,
Yeah,
and I've worked with people for years, ongoing for years. Um, so university can be a difficult place. It can be quite challenging, uh, but I enjoy the creative freedom that I've got, and I'm really lucky in that I don't have to hold down a job as well. This is what I do.
yeah, yeah.
I
Jill
work
says
every
Jill
day.
says you were great at uni, so
I didn't.
Jill says you were great at uni.
Well, I mean, Jill was another. I mean, Jill was a mature student with me,
Yeah,
and it is more challenging. Can be more challenging for mature students. But no, I definitely enjoyed going, and certainly my first degree. I was lucky. I went to the college, and I had three ex-professional photographers who taught me to be a photographer.
yeah,
Whereas I think sometimes university courses, they don't really teach the kids how to take photos.
no,
And it's hard. I mean, trying to make a living as a photographer is hard now.
yeah,
It
yeah.
is difficult. It's tough.
It's a lot harder than when I started.
Yeah.
Very much harder, but you've made a fantastic job of it. Malcolm, on that point, says, "Do you wish you'd started your photography journey earlier in life?"
No, no, because I mean, you accepted, Stuart. I think I'd have burned out, to be honest. And I'm really lucky in that I only photograph things genuinely that I want to photograph.
Yeah,
So I turn a lot of jobs down. I don't do weddings because I don't want to spend every Saturday wrestling with people. I know that you're really good at weddings and enjoy them, but I I only photograph things that I want to do, and I get some cracking jobs. I'm really lucky.
yeah. I mean, I just saw them as a social documentary opportunity, so
Yeah,
I was quite lucky in that respect, in as much as I
yeah.
could get away with it. It was just an extension of being a press photographer in many ways. So that's fantastic. Has anybody got any questions they'd like to ask? Gwyn, have you? Yes, fire
Yeah.
away.
Okay, good evening all, and thank you ever so much, Richard. It was a statement more than a question. I just wanted to really say congratulations to you on a happy retirement. To see somebody who has gone from effectively a full-blown career then to suddenly jump into a new interest that's turned into a professional career, your academic success, your photography success, it's not only a credit to you, but I think it's also the credit to the contribution you're making to other people's lives. And sometimes in the creative journey, we forget how positive that is. Your enthusiasm and what you presented this evening just comes over in spades and buckets. It really does. I did have a former career in the academic world, and now happily retired. I've done photography for sadly for about 60 odd years. I have never ever decided to go into the professionally, apart from a small dabble when I worked for a company in Nottingham called Charles Noble and Son from many years ago. But that's your enthusiasm there, and what you're doing I think is remarkable. So congratulations on a happy retirement. Don't stop.
I've just been lucky with the people that I've picked to work with, really, to be honest.
Thank you.
Fantastic. So thank you. John, did you want to ask a question? John M? You're muted at the moment, John, because we were still getting the echo. So if you unmute yourself for a moment.
No, I didn't. I switched off my audio so as not to
Okay. Thank you.
interfere with or people distracted by my finishing my wine off from.
All right. Thank you very much, John. Thank you. Thank you, John. I'll just mute then. There we
I don't
go.
know if Thomas wants to ask a question.
Well, Nicole's asked a question while Tom's
Okay.
unmuting. Nicole says, do you feel that your first career as a police officer is completely separate from this phase of your life as a photographer, or is there a resonance between the two? Are there ways that one informs the other besides the photograph in the police cell? I can answer that one for you.
Well, then you answer it.
I think it really does resonate because of the way you deal with people and the way you get people to trust you.
Yeah, I mean, I as you know, I completely walked away from the police force, and I don't have any contact really, apart from with a couple of people, and I wanted to completely walk away. I live in a different county, but yeah, it does shape your personality, I suppose. It's also made me very punctual.
Yeah, and capable of working 24 hours a day to get it all in. So yeah, that's a really good question, Nicole. Thank you. Thomas.
Yes, well, I not a question really, but I have had the pleasure of working with Richard quite closely, and I just wanted to say to everyone what an absolute delight it is. He's a consummate professional, and he's got an incredible artistic vision, and it really has been such a joy. And I don't know how you do it, and I look forward to what we do next. So thank you very much, Richard. It really has been a pleasure.
That's great. That's a great comment.
Thanks, Thomas. You're very too kind. Your writing is what's the inspiring thing about the book, really, Tom.
Oh, stop it.
Thank you, Thomas. This says, Richard, your compassion for your projects and subjects is inspiring. Collaboration at its best.
I mean, it's not all plain sailing, Stuart. Not everything works, you know. And there is conflict, and there are tensions, but it's not much more positive than negative. Really is.
Yeah, fabulous. Yeah, well, that's photography, isn't it? Martin Parr used to say he took many more poor pictures than the great ones that he took.
Yeah.
So it just works, doesn't it? Chris, thank you, Chris Upton. Thanks for such an excellent talk, Richard. The sheer amount of projects that you undertake and the creative quality you produce is awesome. Fantastic word. Thank you. And Malcolm says we need to meet up in Harrogate soon. Best of luck to you.
Well, I'm coming to Harrogate because hopefully I'm going to a convalescent home because I've got sciatica at the moment. And that's in Harrogate. So I'm just trying to book in.
What, and you'll better fit that in?
I'll fit it somewhere, Stuart. Yeah.
Well, we've got 3 minutes until 8 o'clock. So has anybody got any final questions before we wrap up? Yeah. Well, what I'd like to say is thank you ever so much, Richard. This has been a fantastic evening. It's really worked great following on from Vivica and David in this creative series. And it's really come over the variety and quantity and quality of work that you've been producing over the last few years. And who was it? Was it Jill or Liz who said, what's your 5-year plan? Well, hopefully that will be, as I say, a 25-year plan. I'm sure you'll still be going well into your 80s. So if we can just unmute just for a moment and give Richard a round of applause, please.
Thank you.
And Richard, you had some links earlier on to your website, presumably to the books.
Yeah.
Presumably, if people want to look through the book and spend some time with them, they can find them all on your website.
Yeah, of course they can. Yeah, it's just richardhall.co.uk. photo.com.
Brilliant. Fantastic. And what I'll do is when the recording is possible, you know, it's live to watch, I'll send you a link to it all, and I'll send you a link to Richard's website as well. So thank you ever so much for joining us, everybody, and zooming in from all over the world. And I really hope that you've enjoyed this evening. So
Thanks
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Fantastic.
Thank
Thanks a
you.
lot. Thanks a lot, Richard. And we'll see you all soon. Okay. Good night, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Well done.